without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ralph Tamburro from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who is the program manager and Northeast Corridor NIWG co-lead. I guess you'll explain that in a moment, Ralph. Okay. And I'm going to give a little background on Ralph. 31 years of FAA air traffic experience in the New York TRACON, which is the approach control. He has held various positions during his career, including air traffic control, traffic management coordinator, traffic management supervisor, operations manager, and traffic management officer. In addition to his normal traffic duties, he's responsible for many of the initiatives to improve the New York area traffic flow. 10 and a half years, he's with the Port Authority, focusing on airport operation improvements by implementing advanced technology. The Port Authority leads the way on innovation and made the initial recommendation to improve the airspace management, which is now known as MARS, M-A-R-S, and you'll explain that later, Ralph. And they have led the way for GBAS, another thing that Ralph will explain later, having the first certified system in the US and are expanding installations to both JFK and LGA. More on that later. He's the co-lead of the Northeast Corridor Work Group to identify and improvements for the New York airspace. Ralph also participated in all the next-gen working groups, including surface, multiple runway operations, performance-based operations, etc. He was involved in one of the first airports to become a CDM member, which they pursued for many years before they were approved. Collaborate decision-making, that's what CDM stands for. This is a program that aims to improve the efficiency and the resilience of airport operations. They are now being challenged with the new entrants to the aviation world. And they want to incorporate these operations without impacting our commercial operations. Guess what that is? And that's why Ralph is here. Future of aviation, drones, and sky taxis, both commercial drones and sky taxis, and how they see they need to prepare for what's coming, and it's coming. So Ralph, please take it away.
All right, thanks, John, for that introduction. As John said, actually, when I wrote that bio, it was 10 and a half years now. It's actually over 11 years with the Port Authority, and John covered my FAA time very well. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Aviation is obviously been a big part of my life, and it's hard to let go, I'll be honest with you. So what you're looking at here is an actual picture of that's Joby's aircraft that flew a demo flight late last year in the New York City area. This is not a mock-up; it's an actual picture of the actual flight. So it was pretty exciting. I was invited to it, and it was a very it was an outstanding event, actually. All right, I'll skip that since that's what we talked about already. This is one of my favorite articles. I've used it in many of my presentations. And what you'll notice here, it says this article was a Popular Mechanics article, and it says we're running out of airspace. And it talks about a 3-day period in 1945 where the New York area was inundated with air traffic, and it was actually known as Black Friday. I'm not sure if that's where Black Friday came from, but that's what it was called. This article was actually published in 1956, and it has a few maps. It's actually a little bit larger of an article. I didn't take all the pictures from it. I just took some of the key ones, and as you can see here, they're showing Newark, Teterboro, they're showing some of the holding patterns. And any of you are familiar with air traffic control, um, this was, they're holding very close to the airport, which is the way they used to operate. We don't do that anymore. Obviously, the airspace has not increased because airspace is finite. But what has changed is the procedures. Back when this was talked about, there weren't many regulations or procedures for air traffic control. But as it developed over the years, you'll see what we run today, which is pretty amazing in my mind. So what you're looking at here, this is a 24-hour picture of all the traffic in the New York area. Actually, this is the five major airports that I call major. And that's JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, also Teterboro and Westchester County Airport. Those were the five airports that always challenge us from day to day to try to manage just because of the amount of traffic. And a typical day, and this is current time, is between 4,600 and 5,000 operations per day. This ring here is a 17-mile radius centered just west of LaGuardia that encompasses those five airports. So that's the primary reason why the New York airspace is as complex as as it's always talked about. It is a very complex, and based on my experience and where I've traveled around the world, this is probably the most complex airspace in the world. So let's look at the flows separately. This is JFK. Again, this is a 24-hour period. This one is a little bit more recent. This was a couple of days ago. I took the snapshot, and it just shows the different flows. This is both arrivals and departures. And then we'll overlay LaGuardia on it, which is in green. Again, this is arrival and departures. And the one thing you'll notice, JFK has the airspace pretty much to the east-southeast of New York City. That generally is where they operate. LaGuardia is pretty much between, operates within the city limits generally. And then when we add Newark, as you can see, Newark is on the west side of the Hudson River. And again, these are all arrivals and departures. And then that's Teterboro and Westchester combined. And you can see it's a very complex flow of traffic. It does work very well. Air traffic control is very proceduralized if you're not familiar with it. So that's how we maintain this operation safe on a daily basis. Okay, this is just another view of the US. This is a snapshot. It was 2200 Zulu, depending on the time of year. I don't think I have the date on this. But in this case, there was 5,050 flights active. Or actually, there's 5,500 flights active. We're looking at 5,050 on this display. And if you look closer, you could pick out the major airports across the country. Here's LA, here's San Francisco, here's Las Vegas. If you come down here, you can see Dallas, Houston. Florida's busy all over. Chicago, you could pick out here. Here's Atlanta. And when you get to the Northeast, the one thing you'll notice about the Northeast, it's pretty much covered with aircraft. And it is the busiest corridor in the, again, it must be the world as far as air traffic going from Boston all the way down to DC. Taking another look at the traffic in a different way. This is look at the traffic density. The color coding is pink is east northeast traffic, blue is south southeast, green is west southwest, and I guess that's purple is north northwest. So if you look here, Seattle, here's LA, Dallas, Chicago. Atlanta. This is Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and this is the New York area. So when you look at it, you can pretty quickly see the amount of volume that is generated out of the New York metropolitan area. For example, the busiest airport in the world nowadays is Atlanta. They run roughly 2,500 operations a day. And conversely, we're doing 5,000 operations out of pretty much the same type of airspace. So that shows you where the complexity is, the volume, and also shows you why we have many of the delay situations that we do. All right, hopefully I can get this to run. This is just a quick video of the traffic flows that I just showed you, but this is what it really looks like. All right, those spaghetti tracks, as we call them, that's kind of more of a wow factor. This is to show you how proceduralized they are. So this is JFK's flow into 22 left and 22 right. This is LaGuardia. The red are the departures, making the left turnout. The arrivals are in green, making a right turn into 22. So they're landing 22, departing 13. Here's Newark's flow, landing 22 left, departing 22 right. And Teterboro is landing runway 19, and they're departing runway 24. So as you can see, it's very organized, but everybody is in very close proximity. A lot of these separations are minimum separation requirements between aircraft, which does, again, that offers a lot of the complexity, especially when we have to deal with weather and things of that nature. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. In fact, any questions so far? Because I'm about to switch gears a little bit. So any questions on anything I showed? Okay. Let's talk about Mars. It's the acronym stands for multi-airport route separation. And this was a recommendation by the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey. Actually, it was me. Something that I have worked on for many years to try to get the FAA to adopt this concept. And finally, when I actually was out of the FAA and working with the Next Gen group, they actually did adopt it, and they've done a very nice job going through safety studies and other required analysis before they actually put it in place. We do expect to see one of the options probably either later this year or early next year. It'll actually be a procedure. So that was actually a joke. Who'll get to Mars first, NASA or the FAA? Because if you know the FAA, it does take quite a while for the FAA to get something in place. Just to give you an idea, this recommendation was first made by me in the FAA in 2010. But with the Next Gen group, it was in 2017. And here we are in 2024, and it's just about to get implemented. So you can see how long it takes for any kind of new concept, a new idea to take hold and actually be implemented. So what is Mars? So Mars is, on the left here, it's basic radar separation. If you know radar separation, it's basically 1,000 feet vertical and 3 miles horizontal. That's basic radar separation. What Mars is allowing, and in addition, controllers tend to add a buffer in between that to just maintain that 3 miles. So what Mars is doing eliminates the need for the buffer and also allows separation to drop down below 3 miles. We're in an era where navigation has become very accurate. In my day, we were still using NDB approaches. We were using VOR approaches, which were, VOR approaches were pretty good, pretty accurate, but NDB approaches were horrible. Best way to describe them. ILS is a very reliable. They've been around for a very long time, but they also have some issues as well. But with this day and age, with RNAV and RMP procedures, navigation has become, very accurate, which is one of the reasons to allow this reduction in separation. So here's an example. Here's one of the issues that we have always faced just because of the amount of traffic and the limited space between airports. So here's Teterboro landing runway 19. And here we would run an approach into LaGuardia with minimal separation, basically at the same altitudes, where right now what we have to do is we actually timeshare. If we're landing this runway, LaGuardia will run traffic for a period of time, then we stop and we have to run, then we run Teterboro for a period of time, stop, and then we go back and forth between LaGuardia and Teterboro. So as you could imagine, that creates quite a bit of delays in the system. So it'd be great to be able to resolve this particular operation after many years. All right, some other next-gen items I'll talk about. One is TFDM, or Terminal Flight Data Manager. This has just started to be rolled out. It did get delayed because of COVID, unfortunately, but what it is a new flight data system for the towers. This is automation improvements for the towers. What I'm showing you here on the left is the flight progress strips, which the FAA still uses. And the PC there that you see, which is probably circa 1985 or in that area, that is really one of the most important pieces of equipment in any tower, because that's how you enter flight plans, amend flight plans. It is a pretty archaic system. So it's nice to see that we're actually moving forward and actually having this replaced. Right now, it's in 10 facilities across the country. We're scheduled here in New York. It's changed several times. We actually convinced the FAA to move us up the waterfall. Because when the first waterfall came out, we were in 2026. We said that's not acceptable for the New York area, so they moved it up to 2023. And unfortunately, COVID hit, so that moved us, and then we moved from 2023 to 2029, which again we said that's completely unacceptable for the New York area, and we now we're in 2027. So it's still not the greatest time frame. I'd like to see it next year or the year after, but it's still better than being last, basically. And that's where CDM comes in, the collaborative decision making that John mentioned. Collaborative decision making has actually been around for quite a while, roughly 30 years, but it was always between the FAA and the airlines. So when I was in the FAA, I was part of CDM. When I started working for the Port Authority and the airport side, we filled out applications just to pressure the FAA into finally saying, okay, we'll make airports part of the system, because honestly, without an airport, you don't have air traffic, right? You're not going to have any place to land or take off. So finally, the FAA did agree. There was several airports. It was New York, the Port Authority airports. It was Las Vegas, Fort Lauderdale, and Dallas were the four main operators of airports that joined. And we are still members to this day. So this is what the new system looks like. All electronic, no paper strips. Allows for quick rerouting of aircraft, which is very critical when we're in the severe weather season, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So again, it's great to see that this is progressing. And, hopefully the FAA can move us up the list once again. Okay, let's talk about GBAS, or ground-based augmentation system. It's much easier to say GBAS. But basically what GBAS is a GPS correction system, right? GPS signals have an error built into them. And we have this system actually corrects it and is actually very accurate. This system is accuracy is down to 0.5 meter, which is roughly 18 inches. Pretty impressive system. We were one of the first in the country. We were the first in the country actually to have it at Newark. It's been operational ever since 2012. When we did put the system in, we did run into some interference problems, but since we were the first installation, that was to be expected. Several things have prevented the system from really maturing. Some of it is related to FAA staffing, as I'm sure most of you have heard about over the last couple of years. Staffing issues really in New York is not really anything new. But it's an ongoing problem. So to give you an idea what GBAS can do for us, this is this is the current flow of the airports, right? This is on one of the configurations that we hardly use, primarily because of the confliction between airports. But what GBAS can provide us is a way to segregate these flows, reduce the miles that they're flying, because it allows for the approaches to be much closer. Also could allow us to land parallel at Newark with some additional time-based separation. So this is the things that we're looking forward to. We could also add another landing runway to JFK, which is 13 right. And believe it or not, 13 right does not have precision navigation to that runway. Okay, so this is actually San Francisco. San Francisco recently installed a system as well. Their main goal for their system is noise abatement. Because of the flexibility of the design and of using a combination of RNAV and GLS or GBAS approach, you can shorten the approach path, similar to what it is here. And as you could see, this is the population that's impacted by the approach. So it's 47,000 versus 329,000 or 296,000. So pretty significant benefits to the communities. Noise has become a big issue over the last 10 years. Everybody blames it on NextGen. But honestly, in the New York area, NextGen is not really it's not used very often. But it's hard to tell people that. The general public, we explain to them what we use with advanced navigation, but they think it's NextGen and, whatever they hear on the news or they hear from other people. So that's what we have to deal with. In fact, I have a meeting tomorrow night to talk about LaGuardia's operation, and it's all related to noise. Okay, SWAP. This is known as the Severe Weather Avoidance Plan. This is the typical SWAP season is roughly April 15th through, we say October 15th, but most years by September 15th or so, it tends to wane down quite a bit. The busiest month for thunderstorm activity is typically July. And I would assume you're familiar with impacts for thunderstorms, very impactful to our airspace. I have a few slides to show you how it impacts the flows, but it is pretty detrimental to our operation. And unfortunately, that's the peak travel time as well. So you have the combination of severe weather and peak travel, peak volume, all kind of fighting against each other. So this is, I won't say this is a typical day, but we have seen days like this with numerous thunderstorms. The numbers you see here, those are the tops of the thunderstorm clouds. You can see they're quite high. Anytime you see anything above roughly 35,000 feet, you're going to have a bad day. In fact, here there's one that's 51,000 feet. That's a pretty serious storm, and I can guarantee you no one's going to fly anywhere near that. So this is a look at the arrival flows, arrival and departure flows. Arrivals are in green, departures are in red, and this is only Newark, LaGuardia, and JFK. And this is a normal flow of traffic. This is, typical day. This is the patterns and the routes in and out of the airspace. And as you can see, they're very tightly designed, right? They're basically side by side in all directions. Most of our volume tends to go out to the west southwest just because of our geographic location. That's what it looks like on a swap day. So as you can see, the lines that were pretty clearly defined kind of get blurred by all the movement of aircraft deviating around weather. So here's another quick video, and I think this should play. Yep. This was actually, believe it or not, this video is from 2005. It was May 14th of 2005. And the reason I use it, basically the flows have not changed. There's some slight changes in the flows, but nothing that's dramatic enough that would change this particular picture. But as you'll see here, this line of weather here, which is the typical area, and if you notice where that is, that's the Pocono Mountains, which help generate thunderstorms. You'll see this line will start to develop, and what you'll also notice is the aircraft not penetrating that airspace. They start to fly around it. So look, this should run for about a minute or so. So here's arrival flows coming in, departure flows going out. So aircraft in red at JFK, blue aircraft in Newark, black aircraft at LaGuardia, yellow aircraft are at Teterboro. So you can see what would happen this is like closing a lane on the LIE at 6 p.m. What do you think will happen, right? I mean, that's basically the same result, except this sometimes closes the entire highway in one shot. So here, all the west gates and all the arrivals coming in from the west are all basically shut off. So what traffic management does is to try to find available routes. We have a pretty significant database of available routes to avoid these types of situations. That's been developed over the last 50 years to come up with these available routes. And as you see, every once in a while, you get a brave soul that'll actually fly through the storm. This is one of the things that actually has changed a little bit because more advancement in technology, it better depicts the weather. So sometimes pilots will actually avoid weather that years ago they may have flown through. That's one of the negatives of technology. All right, so I think that basically gave you the idea of how that works. Let me see if I can. All right, that's the air traffic side. I want to kind of switch gears and talk about some of the things we're doing currently. But before I go on, any questions on anything I've shown so far?
Yeah, it's cool.
Go ahead.
Quick question maybe for the rest of the audience here. Couple acronyms were thrown out there like ILS and RNAV and those. Would you be able to just explain a little bit of maybe like what those are and how they're different there?
Okay, no, that's great. ILS is Instrument Landing System, which basically is a radio beacon. There's multiple pieces to this precision landing system. It is the standard right now, Instrument Landing System, or ILS. There's one that provides vertical guidance, which is known as the glide slope. And the other piece is the localizer, which lines you up with the runway. And it's a radio, basically just a radio beacon that goes straight out from the runway, most of the time straight out from the runway to, and the instruments on the aircraft help you line up both, vertically and laterally to the
Yeah,
again, that is the standard we use today. It's, just about, in fact, just about every aircraft that operates has an ILS system.
yeah.
And
And it's ground based, right, Ralph? So it's requires equipment on the ground.
yes, it's two separate pieces. The glide slope is actually a separate antenna from the localizer. So, you could have one piece fail. Like if the glide slope can fail, you could still use the equipment. But obviously the localizer, if that fails, then the system is not usable. It does take up quite a bit of space on an airport. And it does have limitations. You can't have an aircraft, if you have an aircraft taxi across the antenna, it could distort the signal. Even a truck driving by the antenna could distort the signal to the aircraft. So while it is a very reliable system, it's actually the technology is from like the 40s. Again, very reliable, but it does have some pretty significant limitations.
Ralph, a quick question. I don't know if you can hear me. It's my
Yeah.
mute. It's just a thought that goes through my mind. I get the daily reports, as many of us do, for the VIP presidential and presidential candidate landings and comings and goings in Delaware and Philly and New York. How
Right.
much of that activity during this past few weeks screws up the whole system?
So with the UNGA, we have a pretty elaborate system, especially it impacts JFK the most because most of them actually land there, but it does impact all of our airports, including Teterboro, because some of the dignitaries do land at Teterboro. But we've developed our own system of managing these aircraft. We track them when they're, at least an hour out, so we could start planning what we need for escorts and that type of thing. And we actually open up a command post at JFK that monitors all these flights. We also have police, the Port Authority Police Department there. TSA is there. All the security details are involved in that command post, and they manage this operation. The president. And actually, this time of the year, anybody else running for president is treated equally, right? So those are the most restrictive operations we have when the president actually flies into an airport, especially with general aviation. General aviation is basically restricted from a 20-mile radius of the center of where the president is located. Scheduled air carriers can actually fly in and out. They're allowed to operate, but GA is not. So right now the president's in town. He came in last night. It doesn't. Kennedy has a good setup that we worked on. Again, when I was in the FA, we worked on this to try to minimize the impact of any VIP movement, but especially the president. And, we use it, I'll say 99% of the time, it's very efficient. Typically, the impact to JFK is less than 5 minutes. And then on the way out, again, it's typically less than 5 minutes. So that's why we like the president to go to Kennedy, because it's less impactful. If he goes to Newark doesn't have the available space. actually, and it becomes pretty dramatic impact to that airport. LaGuardia is actually, believe it or not, with the small footprint of LaGuardia, it actually is a pretty easy operation because any presidential or, typically the first lady or the vice presidents usually fly into LaGuardia. And what's easy about it, they make a left turn to the west side of the airport or right turn, depending on what runway they're landing, where most of the activity at LaGuardia is on the east side of the airport. So that segregation does really help the security and helps the operation actually to continue pretty freely. And that's the benefit of Kennedy. So President's leaving tomorrow. We'll be happy when he's gone. And then we can resume somewhat normal operations. We do have a TFR on the UN, but typically after the president leaves, it's very small and really non-impactful to the operation.
Thank you. A couple of years ago, I was talking with folks out at Farmingdale, and they compared Obama's TFRs versus Mr. Trump's, where Obama was very surgical and would say that would not close down all of general aviation for the whole day, but evidently Mr. Trump would just not even have the plan until 20 minutes before. I mean,
so it's the airspace restriction has been modified over many years, and it's really not depending on who the person is. It actually is dependent on where they fly, right? So, we've made some accommodations to allow Teterboro to actually operate, which if you look at the proximity sometimes of Teterboro to some of the TFRs, it's kind of pushing the envelope. But we worked closely with the Secret Service and the White House back years ago to really adopt this type of concept, just to make it easier, because every time he moved, we'd have to move this TFR like 10 miles or 5 miles, and it's virtually impossible to maintain that, especially in this airspace, because it's so impactful. So it is pretty interesting. And I was at many of the of the presidential movements at Kennedy when Obama was president, and he did come to New York quite often. I will admit that. So and I know the other acronym was RNAV, which is required navigation. And basically, it's just an advanced navigation, GPS-based rather than VOR-based.
thank you.
Okay, let's talk about more of our current activities. So, as you can see now, this I don't think was a real picture. I'm not sure. Actually, it could have been. It could have been when Joby was flying in out of Wall Street, but. Right now, one of my tasks is advanced air mobility, obviously because of my background. Our main goal with advanced air mobility is to, as John mentioned earlier, to be non-impactful to our commercial operation. There is no airline that will want us to fly a 4-passenger vehicle that's going to impact an aircraft carrying several hundred people. It's not going to happen, I could tell you. We have enough delays and enough issues on a good day. We don't need anything else impacting our operation. So some of the companies we're working with are really the well-known ones. Joby is pretty much the leader in my mind. Archer is also up there, as is Beta. Whisk. Whisk is actually unique because they're actually going for autonomous flight as a starting point, where all these others will have a pilot. The one thing about autonomous flight, it's not that the aircraft will fly without a pilot, but it will be monitored by someone on the ground. So it's not like it's up there flying on its own. And, if you're a passenger, God forbid something happens, you're on your own. No, it's not that way. There is somebody monitoring it and actually can take control of the aircraft in case something does go wrong. If you're interested, Joby is going to have a static display at the Grand Central Station next week, Tuesday through Saturday. I don't know if this link will work, but if you go on the Grand Central website, it'll give you the information about Joby. And they will have a simulated air as well, which is pretty cool to fly. I've gotten the opportunity to fly it a couple times. I will tell you, it's a very, very easy aircraft to fly. I got pretty much no instructions and was able to fly from LaGuardia to JFK in the simulator without a problem. Okay, so if you're familiar with this, this is the helicopter routing system in the New York area. Again, this is something that has been developed over the last 30 years, very robust. A lot of the reasons for these routes are noise abatement, but a lot of the other reasons are deconfliction with the operation. So when we start our initial transition from helicopters to AAM or eVTOLs, this is the plan. This is what we're going to use. We may have to make some slight modifications to these routes, but that'll be working closely with the local air traffic control to make those changes. The SFRA on the Hudson River. Again, these rules have enhanced the safety on the Hudson River. We're operated many, many years at 1,100 feet and below. Now it's 1,300 feet and below. Again, was operated for many years with a lot of activity, I think even more than we see these days. Unfortunately, this was a result of an accident. That was the mid-air collision between a helicopter and a fixed-wing aircraft. That prompted the FAA to come up with new changes. And these changes really did enhance the safety of the system. So again, initial operations with AAM, the existing structure will work, without a doubt. There's no doubt in my mind that the easy transition will happen. The first few years we'll see some aircraft. It's not going to be like they're flying all over the place like the Jetsons, let's say. But actually, I'm not sure if you know what the Jetsons are, but it's an old cartoon where you did go to your roof and get into your flying car and go on to your destination. But again, the initial structure is easy. I think it'd actually be a pretty seamless transition. Our difficulty is going to become when we go into expansion. As you know, many of these companies want to use this as a commuter operation. They want to fly you from Long Island to Manhattan or Long Island to an airport. Once you start to see those, that is really where it's going to get much more complex and difficult to manage. So just a little history of where we were. Uber Elevate, which is now part of Joby. Discussions actually began back in 2017. Uber Elevate was using helicopters, as does Blade, to and from JFK. It was really a marketing analysis, and they realized that there is definitely a market there between JFK and Wall Street Heliport or the East 34th Street Heliport. So with that, I mean, they made no money on it. This was not a money-making. It was just a market analysis. Since then we have looked at several landing locations. You would think common sense would say, well, why can't you just land at the helipad that's there? It's not quite as simple as that, because the FAA rules and regulations may not even allow that to happen. And most of these companies, they don't really want to work. They don't want to land airside. Some do, but most of them want to actually land landside and have passengers use an air train to get to their final destination. Excuse me, or some other mode of transportation to get to their terminal. Unfortunately, we all know what happened with COVID. COVID kind of put a damper on it for a couple of years. We restarted the discussions back in 2021. And, there's various business models. Each one of these companies have just a slightly different goal in mind. Some want to be more regional. Some want to be just, the commuter type operation. Others want to be cargo only. So there's a lot of different possibilities that we may see over the next year or so. Also, the airlines have gotten involved. You know, many of these companies have partnered with airlines, which in some ways has made it much more challenging. It was almost easier when they were independent because they weren't, they weren't guided by the airline. You know, with the airline, they were obviously, the airline wants the passenger dropped off as close to the terminal as possible. That may not always be an option at some of our airports. So that's what we have to consider. So that's why I say it's made it somewhat more difficult. All right, so I basically covered this. Safe. What we want is safe and reliable transportation to and from our airports. We want to be able to help manage the growth of this, because that's some of my concern, is that I think once this starts, the demand is going to grow pretty rapidly, especially if the price point drops, is what they're anticipating. Their ultimate goal, most of the companies are roughly $3 a mile. So if you figure that out, that's pretty cheap, and I think that's pretty comparable to an Uber ride or a Lyft ride. Again, we want to have good customer experience from the Port Authority's aspect. That is very, very important to us. We don't want to drop you off on an airport and you're on your own to get to the terminal. That would not be a good customer service, right? A good customer experience. Multimodal connections. This is something we have a project with NASA that we're working on to look at this multimodal options. Instead of maybe going all the way to JFK, maybe we can drop you off at Jamaica Station, right? Where you can jump on the air train and get to JFK. It probably would cost you much less, because once you come on an airport, I could tell you the price goes up. That's just the nature of the beast. If you're going to use one of our facilities, it's going to cost quite a bit of money. We want it open to all customers. Initially, I think this will be, your top airline customers, really for the wealthy to use. But as the price point drops, you'll start to see more and more people use it. Again, small number of passengers initially, but we do expect that to grow. There are limitations in the current air traffic system. With that Uber Elevate test that we did, we realized that air traffic could handle a certain amount of operations per hour, helicopter-wise. It's going to be very similar with the eVTOL operations. So it's something that has to be looked at, and actually has been looked at, and they have developed a system to help manage that. We are trying, the main goal that we're trying to develop a roadmap to the future. And we do have a small team put together within the Port Authority to address the operation. This is showing the trip, what it would take. They were very, very conservative with a 49-minute trip from New York City to JFK via the Belt Parkway. I know I've driven that, and it's not 49 minutes. It could sometimes take you 49 minutes to get out of Manhattan. But Joby's flight time would generally be, roughly 7 to 10 minutes is what I would say. Okay, some of the other things that we've talked about is, do we have to build a new facility? Can we repurpose something that we have already? Can we use parking garage roofs, or do we need to build something above that? Because if I lose a parking garage roof, what happens? I lose revenue, right? If you take away parking, if you've parked at one of our airports recently, you can imagine how much money that generates. So those are the kind of things we're talking about. Right now, a lot of them look like they're going to build a platform above a parking garage, or use it maybe a surface lot that is not very busy. So there's a few options that we're actually looking at. It's called a vertiport instead of a heliport. A couple of the other major considerations is charging. Airports use a tremendous amount of power. all our ground vehicles, all our service vehicles that we use on an airport are all transitioning to electric. So that means buses, trucks, cars. I mean, we plus the community has a number of electric cars. So we have to have enough power to generate all that, plus also be able to charge an eVTOL, which they typically will take 2 to 3 times what a Tesla does, which is a pretty significant amount of power. And if you multiply that by the amount of charging stations you would need, it could be a tremendous draw. The other thing we're doing, we're building very big terminals. If you've been to LaGuardia or Newark recently, you can see our terminals have, doubled, tripled in size from what they originally were. And again, that requires a lot of power to generate. The other couple of things we're waiting for, some of the regulatory issues with vertiports. The FAA did come out with a new updated engineering brief. I talked to several of the OEMs today, and they were not very happy. They thought the FAA would have been a little bit more flexible. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of feedback on that particular study. I have not had a chance to look at it, but I will. Obviously, aircraft certification is important. The FAA still is leaning towards treating them similar to a helicopter or like a helicopter with helicopter rules, which are very flexible. Initial operations will be visual flight rules versus IFR operations. But there are a few companies that are looking for IFR operations. Airspace considerations, we've touched on that, and also separation standards, we have to touch on that as well. All right, so how we're approaching this. We had an industry day back in November of 23, where we invited most of the OEMs with several developers of vertiports. We have the NASA project, which I mentioned. In fact, they're doing some simulations down at the FAA Tech Center this week. We also are working with another company. I can't mention the company because we haven't signed the contract yet. But basically, they are going to be there to help us develop a concept of operations, not only for AAM. I know there's been a lot of AAM focused, but also for UAS. We are planning a larger demo flight from one of our facilities, or maybe multiple facilities, down to Wall Street or East 34th Street. We expect that to be in the spring of 25. And the other important part of this, which is always, it's the standard today, is just collaboration with all the stakeholders. That's the only way you can make something like this work in this area. We have to get the local communities, which we've had some outreach. We got the pilot groups, helicopter, airport operators, state and local agencies, and obviously the federal agencies. All right, let's quickly shift to UAS and drone activity. Honestly, we haven't had a lot of activity around drones. And I'll say primarily due to the restrictions imposed by the FAA. FAA for many years did not want any drones flying anywhere near an airport. We've had several issues. We always have drones that show up in places they're not supposed to be. And that's really what's created, I'll say there's a negative connotation when you talk about drones. We have counter UAS work groups. If you recall, about 10 years ago, one of our aviation directors said that we'll shoot the drone down out of the sky. We've had drone strikes at airports. We get drone reports all the time. So that's really what's created this bad rap around drones. And it's unfortunate because drones could be very beneficial to a lot of different industries, including the airport. They have a lot of technology. They could do, runway inspections. There's a number of things they can do on an airport that would help speed the process. In fact, the group I was meeting with today, they had, they were focused on bridge and tunnel inspections using a drone. So that's why I got involved, because we consider a drone aviation related. So we're focused on that. We are doing some work with drones, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But the illegal use of drones is a big problem in our area. The FAA was a little bit slow in the development of regulations over the years. I know that there's the FAA reauthorization bill, which was just passed earlier this year. If you read it, or if you're familiar with it, there's a lot of directives in there about advanced air mobility and also UAS. And what the reauthorization is, it's developed by Congress with input from everybody, and it's basically what the FAA has to do over the next 5 years. Really, one thing that's important that we're working on is let's change these misconceptions that people have with drones. So this is one of the other projects we're looking at. How can we improve the reputation of drones, right? So what can we do? Well, something that serves the public good, right? Or something that we could do to help save money for the Port Authority. There are always a concern about risk from aircraft collisions. Thankfully, we haven't had any major issues. We definitely have had drone strikes. In fact, typically after an inspection, we'll find drones on our airport. Whether they hit an aircraft or not, we're not sure, but they do end up on the airport from time to time. Okay, so how we're doing this? We did a UAS test flight last year. I think it was May of last year, and we flew between two of our facilities. And as you can see, it was a pretty straight shot. I forget the actual distance. I mean, if you have really good eyesight, you could read that, and then you can see it here on the map. Some of the key points, it went from New Jersey, Jersey City to the rail yard in Brooklyn. We had to stay obviously below 400 feet. And we want it to be at least at 250 feet, because then we have to be concerned about ships in the harbor. And actually, we did actually fly about 200 feet. So that was our biggest concern. It wasn't actually helicopter activity in the Hudson. It was actually the ships, in the Hudson River that were causing us a problem. It was 3.5 miles each way, pretty straight flight, but we had to have a chase boat to follow the aircraft. We had to have a second person that could take control of the drone in case there was a problem. We had to closely coordinate with the FAAs. This took a tremendous amount of work to do, really a couple of flights. It went flawless, and really the package delivery was a box of Girl Scout cookies. Not for any reason we picked Girl Scout cookies, but that's what we chose, just to really show that we could actually do this safely. All right, so since then, we've partnered, we have a contract with Skyports Drone Services, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they do a lot of work outside of the US. They have a big operation I know of in South Korea, where they actually do these drones, and this is one of the drones they use. They have several models that they use, and they're transitioning, multiple different items back and forth between some of the rigs that are out in the water. So really, our task to Skyports was to research how we could use drones and in a drone delivery service type operation. They went out looking for possible use cases. Our role in this was, again, it's public benefit. This is not going to make any money for us. In fact, when we proposed this to the executive in the Port Authority, they asked us, well, what's the point of this? And we said, well, the point of this is to show that you could use drones to benefit the public. Even if we don't continue this service, we're just trying to open up the idea that this service can be used in the New York area. Other things that we do currently use drones for bridge inspections. But I think our drone is just a basic, it's not a basic drone, but it's a high-end drone, but it doesn't have some of the bells and whistles that I saw today. So we're going to actually introduce what I saw today to the bridge inspections to see if they want to use that system. We also have used it for port inspections, same type of thing. We did a demonstration of the capability. We actually did a demo of inspecting tunnels as well, which is pretty significant because this is normally done by people. It's very time consuming. And it's pretty work intensive. It's not the best conditions to work under either. So using a drone is actually a very good use of this type of vehicle. All right. So some of the future UAS work that we're looking at is using the drones I saw today have bright LED lights so they can do nighttime inspections, something that we don't do now. Again, you could use it during less peak times or off-peak times, using LiDAR to create 3D simulation models of the structure, infrared imaging. I got a question mark by airports because while we would like to use it for airports, I know it's going to be a long road to get that approved through the FAA. But there are some possibilities there that could help us reduce the time it takes to do inspections. Expanded drone delivery service. Again, this is things that we're looking at. We have several concepts proposed. I can't go into detail, unfortunately. Some of them are actually pretty exciting. But, until we actually have a finalized product, then we could actually advertise it. So I would say stand by. Probably within the next 6 months, we'll have some type of announcement of some of the work we're doing with Skyports. And obviously the advantages: saves time, money, improved inspections, increased productivity, and the safety of the employees. It's as simple as that. And that's it. Here's my contact information. More than welcome to reach out to me anytime you want. Sometimes my schedule's a little busy, so I may not respond right away, but I typically do respond to every email. And that is it. Any questions at this point?
Hey, Ralph, I have a question about the integration of both drones and beyond visual line of sight applications and AAM in the national airspace system, especially like in the New York Class B environment. It just sounds like it's going to be crazy. And you see a lot more like to separate these other types of aircraft. Right now, you talked about altitude restrictions as one technique to do that, like keeping drones below 400 feet, maybe keeping the AAM between 400 feet and wherever they're going to bump into the the aircraft that you're used to control in your previous job, right? But to make this efficient, it'd be nice to be able to mix these things and have them all flying, uh, so that the ATC system could deconflict the traffic at the altitudes that made the most sense. Just do you see things
Right.
going that way?
Well, there'll be some of that, I'll say. Drones are going to tend to be always low level, right? You're probably not going to want
Yeah.
drones in the in the 1,500 feet or above zones, just because it's just going to add a level of complexity. So the one thing that has been developed, and I just realized I didn't have a slide on it, but it's called urban traffic management, or UTM traffic. UTM is urban traffic management, and what this system will do, and with our demo, we're actually going to have a UTM system that was developed by one of the OEMs to show the capability in the future. And what this will have is it will have all the aircraft being tracked on, let's say, on the Hudson River. Like right now, when you're flying up and down the Hudson River, you're basically on your own, right? You have to make transmissions, you have to announce each other at different points on the route, but there's no air traffic monitoring of that. There
Right.
could be, like we could see it, but there's very limited coverage of radar in Hudson River too, because of the buildings.
Oh, I didn't know that. I actually fly
Yeah.
that route quite often.
Yeah, I mean, some aircraft you could see, with the ADS-B surveillance, it's better now. So I think the coverage will probably be better. But it's going to be a requirement. You're going to need that kind of coverage to be able to track all these vehicles on the river.
Yeah. Do you see
And
the
that's,
like the
okay.
Joby aircraft, the AAM aircraft? Do you see them flying, mixing it up like when the in the Hudson River corridor though with other VFR aircraft?
Yeah, yeah, there probably will have to be because the one thing about all these eVTOLs is they have a lot of different performance capabilities.
Mm,
So Joby's aircraft actually could fly up to 200 miles an hour, right? So it's a pretty fast aircraft. But what we're looking at on the screen now is Volocopter. Volocopter is not quite as fast, so that some of that's going to have to be a consideration. Um, will it need a speed restriction on the Hudson River? That's
yeah,
a lot of unknowns right now. We don't know if we need that. Again, this initial transition, which we'll see in the next year or two, from primarily helicopters to maybe eVTOLs, because sightseeing operations, I think we're running about uh, 30,000 flights a year. Um, those will transition to eVTOLs, much more efficient. They probably could have a lower price point. Helicopter, the flights from the heliports in New York to the airports, those are going to transition to eVTOLs. They've already told us. Blade, who does the helicopter operations now,
right.
is going to transition to eVTOLs as well. So initial transition should be pretty straightforward. It's
Yeah,
that point where it starts to increase in volume. You're going to have a better traffic management system. You'll probably even if you look at the reauthorization bill, it actually allows a third party to become a traffic management provider. Doesn't
right,
have to be the FAA,
right.
which
That's
is a big
interesting, right?
step. Yeah,
Because
because I'll tell
and
you, I'll tell you, air traffic cannot handle it. And I'll give you an example. After 9/11, we had to work every VFR aircraft in and out of the Class B. And I will tell you, we were inundated with traffic. We could not manage it because the systems were not designed to be operated that way. So
right,
you actually have to have a system that's designed to handle all these aircraft. Change in separation standards. A lot of these regulations that still have not come out from the FAA will have to be developed over the next several years.
yeah. One of the third party UTM systems that you kind of referred to, they're implementing in Dallas with between wing and zipline, I think, or coordinate. Are you using is that what you're trialing in
No, we're
your
using
area?
a system called Vector, which is developed by
Okay.
EVE, which is one of
Oh,
the OEMs. But their aircraft
yeah,
they're not going to have a certified aircraft for like 5 years, but they're focused more on this UTM operation. And it is a very impressive system. It provides a lot of digital communications with air
yeah.
traffic control. That's actually what NASA is evaluating down in the FAA Tech Center is actually digital communications.
Yeah, it's interesting. I happen to work for AT&T, and I do a lot of work with drones and a little bit of AAM stuff. And the implications for like cellular communications for command and control and things are is a whole area that I don't think people really have an appreciation for how fragile that could be and how that has to be thought through, not just
Yeah.
exercised and put thousands of these things on the system and expect it to work without flaw.
Right, right. And
That's going to be interesting.
that's why when I do these briefings, I am very concerned about the growth of the system. You know, most of the OEMs say, oh, we'll only have a few aircraft. Yeah, but if I have 10 operators that have a few aircraft, now I have 20 aircraft flying around the
Right.
area. You know, and when you're flying 7 to 10 minutes each direction, you know, you could have a lot of activity pretty quickly here in the New York area. I mean, we are one, you know, we are one of the top markets in the world. I was on a group with 8 other airports across the country. I'm sorry, across the world. It was me, Dallas was on that, and I think LA, and then it was airports. I even forget them all, but every airport, including Dallas, were like, we don't really see a market, right? And I was the only one that said, well, I'm actually the opposite way because, you know, a lot of the European countries, they have rail systems direct to the airport. It takes 15 minutes to get downtown. You jump on a train. This may not be that for that particular city, but a city like ours, where it could take you, you know, it could take an hour and a half to get from an airport to downtown.
Yeah.
The demand
That's
is
a
going to be.
7-minute example you just gave a little while ago, a few slides ago, right?
Look, I take public transportation to the city and it takes me an hour and a half, right? If I could jump on this and it's maybe a little bit more expensive, maybe I wouldn't do it every day, but maybe I
Yep.
would do it when I needed to get home quickly or get to work quickly.
Right. And they're talking about going uncrewed, right? And when that happens, the cost of operation is going to drop dramatically, and this is going to be cheaper than Uber, and it'll be a mass
Absolutely.
market thing,
Absolutely.
right?
And you know, the uncrewed thing is, I still think that's a ways away because the FAA is going to be very cautious when it comes to that. But
And I'll jump in here, Ralph. You know, personally, I think it has to do a lot of acceptance, public acceptance.
Yeah.
I'd be much more comfortable if there was a pilot in one of these drones instead of getting in, knowing it's supposedly safe, but I have a remote pilot in there, you know, that has our interests in mind. I think that type of drone activity, public opinion will have a hard time with. That's just my only opinion on it, you know, but that's what I feel. Steve, I think you found your new best friend, which is awesome. I think you guys have a lot to talk about. And thank you very much. I want to keep this moving a little bit. And you know, he's open, and you guys can certainly correspond. And I encourage you, Steve, you know, to reach out to Ralph, because
Yeah, thank
obviously
you.
you're very interested in this, and so are we all. But you have a stake in the game. You got an aircraft that flies up and down Hudson, so I could see you're real interested in this, and for really good reason.
Yeah. I like
Um,
that Jetsons analogy. I think that's going to
yeah,
have
I
to
love
be
it.
another future thing,
That's my
right?
that was my favorite thing you said, Ralph.
And you know what may happen is, unfortunately, that airspace may have to change in order to
Sure.
accommodate this. Just like we changed it with the accident, you know, we may have to shift the way this works with AAM. I mean, it just might be, you know, unfortunately, reality of the advancement of aviation. So we'll see
So
what
what
happens.
one of the things that Joby said to me in one of our, I think it was one of the conferences I was at, that they really want to make this happen by 2028. At least get that something off the ground and working. They're ready, but they're not ready when it comes to regulation. I think, you know, I feel they're, you know, I mean, you looked a little. I think they need time to really make this work within the regulatory system. Um, that is going to be a challenge, and they said they'll be ready for that challenge in 2028. Do you think that is a reasonable future prediction?
I think you'll see it before.
Awesome.
In fact, I sat down with Joby today. I met up with a couple of the representatives in the New York area, and they actually believe they will have a certified aircraft by the end of 25.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean they'll start flying the next day, but you know, having a certified aircraft is a big deal.
Yep.
The other part of this, there's going to be electric powered fixed wing aircraft. Those are coming too. If you're familiar with Beta, Beta actually has been flying their fixed wing electric power aircraft all over the country, primarily East Coast, but they've been flying, and they have they actually have a network of charging systems already installed. So you could go from airport to airport, charge up your aircraft, and then fly to the next one. So they already have a pretty elaborate system. They're going to install their system at two of our airports, Stewart and Teterboro. But we're looking at possibly using some of their technology at all of our airports. There's a standard plug. Beta has pretty much the standard, the industry standard, but unfortunately, Joby is using their own proprietary plug. So that creates a little bit of a problem for us when we have to cite a vertiport, but those are things we're working around. I think that those are going to be the two primary plugs, the one that Beta uses and then the one that Joby uses.
Interesting. All right, if I can ask anybody else any last questions for Ralph, and then we'll just move along. This is Ashley Tobar, our was intern, now member, a college student. I will leave my question in the chat in terms of crime control and prevention, considering crime in New York and the need to maintain public order. Are there safety protocols that will be established? How safe would it be in comparison to public transportation?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, if the FAA just signed an agreement with the New York Police Department, I didn't read it fully, but it actually was in today's news. If you look it up, they have some type of agreement with the New York City Police Department for surveillance purposes for drones. But that's our number one concern is safety, right? This is really an untested market, untested aircraft. Drones have been around for a long time, but eVTOLs have not. They've flown a lot of miles. I mean, I think Joby's aircraft in their test facility out in California, they probably have flown, 300,000 or 400,000 miles. They did have one incident. They did have one aircraft that actually burned. Again, that's one of our concerns is, these are electric power. It is lithium ion batteries. What happens if there is a fire? How does that impact the rest of the airport? I've warned the OEMs, we cannot lose the terminal. If I put you too close to a terminal and you have a fire and I have to shut down a terminal, I can guarantee you will never fly to one of our airports again.
Yep.
It only has to happen once.
Right.
One time.
I said that will destroy the industry. I mean, do you want that? Of course not. Nobody really wants that. But they're thinking differently, right? They're thinking the best passenger experience. I said, well, you're going to have to look at it differently. We need to be a little cautious. Let's build something that's away from a terminal that if you do have an incident or an accident or fire, that it doesn't shut down one of my terminals. We lost the terminal last year to a fire for a day and a half. And it was our least busiest terminal. And I will tell you, the amount of work that created and the amount of impact to the passengers was tremendous. I can't, I just happened to be at the airport that day. And, I started outreaching to other airports to let them know that we have this problem. We're not going to be able to take these airplanes. They're going to divert to your airport and they're probably going to sit there overnight. And Joby is partnered with Delta, and Delta operates at a Terminal 4 at JFK. So, for example, Terminal 4 averages about 60,000 passengers a day. So if you think I'm going to impact 60,000 passengers for a 4-passenger vehicle,
Yeah.
Again, it would only happen once, and it would not happen again because they would completely disallow that operation. So the industry's got to be cautious. I know that's where the FAA comes in. The FAA is keeping them at bay, trying to keep it slow. because that's the only way it's really going to be tested. You know, and the example I was using with Joby is the one thing Joby hasn't looked at is how often, you know, what happens to the vehicle if they take off and land 50 times a day. You know,
Right.
the wear and tear on the system. You know, they signed an agreement with Dubai, right? What about sand on you know, how does that impact the aircraft? You know, there's a lot of unknowns in this whole industry right now, and that's really where we have to learn. That's why they have to progress slowly and be very cautious in the beginning.
So I'd like to move on, but I got one more thing that came to mind. And you know, Jonathan Atkin was there. A gentleman named Ed Kostakis was there. This was and if you remember, Ralph, we had at New York Police Plaza, we had a meeting with the lawyers at the police department, and we had some pretty hot discussion. There's no doubt about that. And one of the things, you know, they wanted to see how it would affect us, how they can help, but it seems it didn't really help. And one of the biggest things that was brought back to my attention was that, okay, you sign up as a commercial, you're vetted, and I'm going to say this, and this is the way I understand it. It takes about a month the first time to get it through the system. This is to allow you to fly in New York City a drone, okay, film work, whatever, okay. Then it got better. I was asking Ed, did it get any better, you know, with you? And he says, well, 2 weeks. And, you know, it's really not realistic for when a company owner calls, let's say, Scott Harrigan and says, I need the volumetrics and I need it pretty quickly. And he's got to go through all this to get his business to work for this client, right? So my question is, do you see that improving as far as time with UTM in the mix? So providing UTM to the police department, right? So they could just look at somebody in aviation, could look at these charts and go, you know, we could do this if they want to be in charge of this. But to have the paperwork going back and forth and this and that doesn't work for the community, for our community as pilots.
I mean, UTM will definitely help that. Are you guys familiar with New Air?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So I've worked with them quite a bit too, and we've tried to get a system down here, one of their systems as well. And their system, I got a briefing a couple of months ago, and it is pretty impressive what they have available now. You know, I would love to see that system down in New York to start, you know, monitoring these aircraft. The problem is always going to be is air traffic. You know, unless they develop this UTM system to where air traffic can approve it immediately, which probably could happen. I mean, that was some of the concepts because NASA was behind the development of UTM and the concepts. And you know, I've worked with them for many, many years now. And they have a very solid concept of how to operate these vehicles. You know, because especially drones, most of the time, you know, they're going to fly relatively low. And as long as you're not you know, at the end of the runway, you're not an impact to aviation, other aircraft.
Yeah.
If you know, so
Yeah.
it can work. I know the process right now because I know some of the people in the tower it's archaic the way they do it now.
Quick comment just to tie a bow on that discussion. It's kind of funny what John brought up volumetrics. I've probably done more Lance operations in New York than a lot of people. The funny thing is where we're sitting right now. The New York side, what John's talking about, the actual permit to take off and land to use New York City's, let's say, public land to operate a drone is like a massive undertaking. But I think the funny part of here is I can't commend air traffic control in New York City enough for how simple the process actually is as a drone operator. I probably filed more JFK airspace applications than anyone perfect example, John was talking about, I did a stockpile calculation, maybe 800 feet east of one of JFK's runways. And after we got everything tied up with New York City, the Lance approval, and that was a manual, like an manual approval, right? Because it was over the Lance grids. I think JFK couldn't have been more helpful. That was actually an incredibly straightforward process for me as a drone operator. So I think the air traffic control part with drones is in the last 6 years has gone from me having to manually call a tower and hope I'll get a yes and that they know what's going on, to a very hands-off, clear cut, automated, like I know what to do, the tower knows what to do. So, that gives me a lot of hope on the UTM side that if we can get there with drones, we can get further with this other air traffic.
Yeah, local air traffic is always the best to work with in any aspect. Once you get above local air traffic and you get into headquarters stuff, the bureaucracy there is pretty rough. But yeah, I actually forgot about the land system, and that was a big enhancement as well.
Yeah.
That does make a big difference.
Yeah, it's been pretty win-win, I think, for operators and ATC.
Yeah, because if you go back a couple of years, they would just say no, right?
Yeah, I remember
They
when
wouldn't even listen.
I remember when Newark was all 0-foot grids too, and it was like no way, no how, and it's a lot easier to operate there now, at least on the outer rings of the airspace. So it's really has improved.
No, that's great to hear. Great to hear.
So, I think we're good. You did a wonderful job, Ralph. I knew that was going to happen, based on your experience and your demeanor. Thank you. It's awesome. It's awesome to work with you, talk with you, and since the day I met you. So I really, really appreciate the time that you spent with us tonight. And
my pleasure. Anytime, like I said, you want to reach out, you have any questions, something happens, please reach
sure.
out.
We'll
What
definitely.
is your phone number again? It was on the screen for 2 seconds, but
It's 917
yeah.
828 7741. I will tell you the best way to reach me is either text or email, because I'm typically on some teleconference throughout the days, pretty much all day long. So
Understood.
Okay. Before we move on, is there any other business? Does anybody want to add or say anything about what they're doing currently? Okay. So I've got some closing comments today, and it's about the future of AUVSI Empire State Chapter. Few days back, well, I should say this has been a work in progress, but a few days back, with the help of Scott Harrigan, with the read from George Lamboy, and really great help from Jennifer Sertle, our vice president. We, as an executive force, are going to move on. So what that means, over the next 6 months, we're looking for a particular people to replace the executive board. That's including myself, Jennifer, George, and Scott. And it's no small task. It is no small task. And we understand that. I wrote a letter, 2-page letter, which my executive board helped me with, and explained that to Michael Robbins, the CEO of AUVSI, and Scott Schaffman, who is a big government person for AUVSI and really was our leader. All the presidents would look up to him and talk with him, and they're both doing a great job. And they understood. They understood that, and I'm not going to read the letter to you, but I'll reference the letter. Basically the past 3.5 years, AUVSI and the Empire State, we're very grateful for the opportunity to help us grow. Really are. The connections that we made, Jonathan, Steve, Ashley. I mean, Ashley, she's wonderful. I mean, here's a college student that, wants to really know what's going on and be part of this future. And I basically gave a little background from 2021 under the guidance of Mr. Dave Schwam, who was the president back there, and I became the vice president. And then he actually stepped down. He needed to move away. And guess what? I got handed the presidency. So that was an interesting transition. Because I believed in integrity and trying to keep things going, and I believe in the AUVSI, I took that undertaking. And so what we're going to do with the help of National, this is very important to know that we are seeking actually 3 people at this point. One that lives nearby the capital region, so they're directly talking to our nation's government and have those connections. So we're looking for a stakeholder that's interested in networking, that has a relationship with New York State, and can be that assistant to National. Not the other way around, not a bottom up, a top down. That's what we're looking for. And we made that very clear in the document that we sent them. We have to be led. The people who are getting paid need to lead on a top down situation where we can help assist them and moving AUVSI forward. So we're looking for certain individuals that are definitely movers and shakers that they could get involved with AUVSI, and who knows where that goes for them, and may benefit them very well. So why I said 3, capital region, possibly north, Yonkers through Long Island, and Western New York. That's where we're looking for people to operate in behalf of AUVSI, again, from a top-down situation, okay? We also gave them 50, courtesy of Jennifer's hard work, 50 companies in New York State that might be candidates in each of these regions. So I had launched that letter. They responded immediately. Matter of fact, I called Mike. I said, Mike, I don't want you to be blindsided by this. We're sending you a letter because A, B, C, and D. And he was very kind, and he understood. And I had a long conversation with Scott Schaffman. And basically, we as a group got many, many accolades of what we've done. Now, what did I promise them we would do? I promised them that we would rebuild New York State chapter as a working entity. It was going really well for some time, then it slid off. And we had to bring it back, and we did. And we made this a working business. And that's what I said we would do. We will bring back the nonprofit. We will get our banking in order. We will make it statewide. We will have meetings. We will educate. That's the biggest thing we're doing right now with Ralph on board. We're educating the public. What I'm going to do once it comes on, as many of you know, I put it in my Premiere Pro and edit it, and I get Ralph out there to all 138 members. And then some, right, Scott? And then some.
Yep.
We have all contacts. So Ralph, when you get this thing, send it out there.
Yep.
When anybody gets it, send it to your friends. Steve, please send it to your friends, because we need that help, and we do need a change. And it's time. I remember starting back in 2021. Might seem short, 2021, 2022, 23, 24. I'm definitely on for another 6 months. There's no doubt, to help transition and to help do this. But it's going to come to an end. And we agreed as a board that we need a new board. So now they know. And you know. So this is all being recorded. This will be brought out there. And we're seeking for new people to help us out. I've requested that I would help with the New York, Long Island area, okay, as an advocate. So I'm not going anywhere, okay? Our board is not going anywhere. We are dedicated to help the new people come in. We're going to help the new people. We're not going to just dump on them. Hey, we got dumped on a lot, Scott, right? In the past. That's not going to happen again, okay? Not going to happen. We're going to help people through this. So I want to make that very clear, that I'm sure we will all have a hand in some of this at some point in our lives in the future, but I know I'm staying around and asking for that advocacy in this area. So, but important that the president, and I'm not on the board, don't get me wrong, I'm not part of the board or an advocacy team, but I think the president really needs to be in the Capital District. So that said, are there any questions? Okay. So we're all on a mission here to help each other out and really bring life to our chapter and live events. That's the next step, live events, where these regional people can actually hold some live events. So I would love to see that in the future. So that's the idea, guys. So we need your help. And it looks like our next guest is going to be quite interesting. A graduate working on his PhD, 3,000 hours in the air and manned aircraft, and 1,000 with his drone. And he, I'm not going to mention his name right now. I'm coming to an agreement with him, but I got to tell you, he's very excited to be here in November, and we will release that information ASAP. So the next one, and he's gassed. I can tell you, the man is gassed. So we have one more conversation to put this to bed, and we will have a wonderful guest speaker come the last Tuesday of November. Thank you guys so much. Everybody enjoy their evening, and thank you for all your support.
Yeah, thanks for all you're doing.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Steve. Stay well,
Thanks, all.
everybody.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
Thanks. Take care, all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye, Jonathan. See you, pal.
Thank you.
Bye, Lottie.